Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. I know most of us are tired of living in historic times, but the reality of it is that human beings have always lived in historic times. Yeah, there have been moments that have caught the headlines more than others. There have been things that we remember years later in the cultural narrative of history, but it's always been interesting, and regular people have always had a lot stacked against them. And I would say that this is a continuation of all of that. There are things that human beings haven't quite resolved. We haven't figured out how to work together en masse. And if you've listened to me before, you know that I talk about Pluto in Aquarius a lot, because this is a moment where I see us working out a lot of those issues. And unfortunately for us, it looks like we're going to be doing it because we have to. And the reality of it is I'm not happy about a Trump presidency, but we were going to have to do this under a Harris presidency if that was what happened with this election. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And yeah, that work might have looked a bit different, but we are under a Democratic presidency right now. And those of us who have a vision for a better future have been fighting pretty hard against state violence, against a government that doesn't seem to have any desire to help regular people get by better than they are now. And with continuing pandemics, I've still got my eye on H5N1 because I don't think that that's being handled the way that it should be. I think we're in for another treat with that one, as I've been saying. We've also still got COVID going around. That's going to pick up this winter as well, so make sure that you are masking, taking care of your community, making sure that you're not spreading a deadly and disabling virus to yourself and your loved ones. Because it's going to be really hard to fight fascism if you're very chronically ill, if you are unwell, if you are dealing with chronic fatigue, as a lot of people that deal with long COVID are. And we've also got climate catastrophes increasing in drama and perhaps in frequency. These are all very serious things that are just a part of American life. They've become so normalized, so acceptable, that the reality is that all of us that are looking for answers to these issues, we're never going to find them in the 2024 presidential election. So none of this is to downplay the seriousness of the moment that we're at, but rather just to say that it was always going to be serious. It was always going to be serious, and it was always going to require us getting our shit together. So here we are. Here we are in this moment. And there's a lot to say. And I've said some of it already over in Patreon. I'll talk more about that throughout this episode. If you want more of my election thoughts, Patreon is going to be the place. And as we see things ratchet up, and don't worry, I'm going to continue talking a lot about Pluto in Aquarius because we have a lot to know, we have a lot to prepare for, and go back and revisit some episodes. I'm going to put some links in the notes section of this episode so that you can check out some things that I've already said about Pluto and Aquarius. But honestly, chances are you pick an episode of this podcast, probably I'm talking a little bit about Pluto and Aquarius in all of them. So there's a lot there. There's a lot I've said, and I'm going to keep talking about it, so don't worry. But this is the last week that we have Pluto in Capricorn in our lifetimes. We've made it this far. We've made it this far. This is a transit that started in 2008. If you remember the big financial crisis that happened way back when, yeah, that was kind of the beginning of Pluto in Capricorn. And we can see all of the ways that corporate power and government abuses and the relationship that our United States government has with corporations, that incest that's been happening and fucking all of us over, yeah, that's Pluto and Capricorn. So the grand finale of Pluto and Capricorn that we are living through right this very moment of course it was going to be dramatic. Of course it was going to be intense, and probably not going to be the things that the average, regular, progressive person who wants a better world was going to want to see. In fact, right now we're getting a bird's eye view of the problems that need to be addressed as we move into Pluto in Aquarius next week. And of course, it's not going to be all resolved right away. It's almost 20 years that we're going to be working out these issues, growing together, building community, and fighting back against these concentrations of power and resources that actually are the source of a lot of our problems. So there's much work to be done, and I'm going to keep talking about that. But right now, let's get us through this week. And yeah, it's going to be another historic one, but I'm going to do my best to prepare you, to give you an idea of what we're looking at this week and get us ready to head into Pluto in Aquarius with our heads held high, with hope and faith that we're going to move through this somehow, some way, and we're going to do it together. Today on the podcast, I talk about the disruptive Taurus full moon on November 15th. Then I get you ready for the astrology of another big week ahead. The full moon in Taurus. So that is happening on Friday, November 15th at 1:28 p.m. Pacific time. And it's happening at 24 degrees and 1 minute of Taurus. Now, this is the last full moon of Pluto in Capricorn. So that in and of itself tells me that this is a very significant moment. And on a collective level, I know that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty right now, particularly with regards to what we know about the US elections at the moment. And in this climate of fear and uncertainty, I have seen a lot of people suggest that there is going to be something that happens around this full moon that will completely change our understanding of what happened in this election. I'm not going to try to predict exactly how this full moon is going to play out on that level, because this full moon is conjunct Uranus, and that is not a planet that I would associate with predictability. It is a planet that often is disruptive because it brings to light things that we probably weren't expecting. And sometimes things can be disruptive in a good way. We can have ideas, epiphanies, things coming to light that are needed. So it's not that it's a bad thing to be disrupted necessarily. It just kind of depends on what it is. But I do think on a collective level that this full moon will be one that disrupts a lot of people's sense of comfort. And I think a lot of us have a sense of comfort that may be built on things that aren't as stable as we might like to think. Or, we are comfortable in kind of our little bubble, but there's a whole world outside that we're a part of and we have to interact with. So maybe we're not as comfortable as we thought. Maybe we're just isolating. There's a lot to it. But another thing I want to point out with this energy is that people are very activated right now. And they're spreading information that they just heard from someone else who has maybe no evidence. I've seen a lot of that happening. They have a feeling. And I want to say that, I don't want to downplay how people are feeling about this moment. And I am an intuitive person myself. But I think it's always a good idea to take a pause and look for some credible sources of information before running off with it. But especially with this energy. So I'm going to advise listeners to expect the unexpected with the news at the end of this week. And I am certain that there will be news that has a wide impact. With the full moon being in Taurus, I do think that there is the potential that we get some financial news, some economic news around this full moon that is pretty significant. But I want to caution people against assuming that whatever news comes out is going to mean a total reversal of what we know about this election right in this moment. I think it's very important to see the present with clear eyes and understand that it looks like there was a greater proportion of votes for Republicans in 2024 than in 2020. So I think that it's entirely possible that the results that we're seeing right now are pretty close to how things actually went on the ground. And the reason I want to emphasize this is because I want people to know that time is of the essence, especially now that it looks like we're heading towards another Trump presidency, and we should be using this time between now and January to plan accordingly. On a collective level, for this full moon, those of you who have known me for a bit now know local community, local community, local community. We need to build and strengthen connections in our communities because that is the biggest asset that we will have for Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto moves into Aquarius for the next almost 20 years, 4 days after this full moon. So this full moon to me is really the grand finale of Pluto in Capricorn. And I do think that we will get some clarity from this energy on a collective level. And of course, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to be enlightened by the full moon, right? You know, we're all coming at life with different experiences, different education levels, different understandings of the world. So it's not going to impact everybody in the same way. But on a collective level, I do think that there will be clarity to be found here and probably some revelations, again, that have a big collective impact. Interestingly, this is a full moon that aspects all of the outer planets. So that is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. This is going to reveal a lot about our collective experience. So think about how much humanity has gone through over the course of Pluto and Aquarius in 16 years. How much has evolved? And so I think that that will be very illuminated by this full moon. And this is another lunation that I think is pointing us towards how connected and impacted we all are by existing power dynamics. And we're not all impacted in the same way. We're not all impacted in the same way at all. But the fact that we are all impacted means that we can ally with each other. We can come together. We can find common ground and understand that the existing state of things is bad for the collective. All right? And it might not be bad for us all in the same way, but we have a common fight. Our individual progress and evolution is our own, but we are also part of a collective, meaning that if we're collectively experiencing, for example, fascism, that is going to make it a lot harder for most people to progress and evolve to their liking. So on a collective level, I think that this full moon is a reminder of that. Our comfort is not just our own at the end of the day. Our ability to support ourselves and others is in some ways beyond ourselves. So let's talk about how we can work with this energy on a personal level, because that's where we get to make the decisions. That's where we get to take action or not. And so the lead up to this full moon, which we will be in at the moment that this podcast is released to the public, the lead up to this full moon has an intensity to it. And a lot of our nervous systems are going to be activated. And I know a lot of us already are in kind of a panic mode. So I really want to flag that for people because I want people to be mindful of that. Make sure that you are moving your body, taking care of your mind by not feeding it stuff that is anxiety inducing or distressing. There's a lot of news coming out right now, and I think between now and the inauguration especially, we're going to be getting a lot of information coming out that's probably going to be alarming, you know? So I don't want people to check out completely. I think, you know, if you make it a point to do your news catching up periodically and not just be constantly scrolling or constantly checking the news, I think that's a lot better of a strategy because we know that it's not going to be good. You know, we know a Trump presidency is going to be a clown car of villains. So we don't necessarily always need to be tuned into the play-by-play. And the media makes a lot of money off of us constantly engaging. And that includes social media. That includes content creators. And I know I've seen people online saying like, oh, I don't pay these people. So how am I contributing to whatever message that they're sending? Well, even if you don't pay somebody directly, watching their videos, spreading information that they're sharing, listening to their podcast, those are all ways that you contribute to people like me growing. You don't actually always have to give us money directly to contribute to our growth. But I'm pointing this out because I want us to remember that media and content creators do have this motivation to get engagement. And a lot of times fear and anxiety are really good for engagement. They're really good for engagement. So just understand that these people might not necessarily have your best interest in mind. And there are some really good, responsible journalistic outlets. There are really responsible content creators. I like to believe that I am one of them. And we want to be responsible with our platforms, share good information, and not key people up, stress people out. But the best thing to do, I think, is just be very mindful of what you're consuming, how you're consuming it, and not work yourself up, especially around the time of this full moon. So focus on things that are soothing and things that give you a sense of connection to yourself, to your physical body, to your spiritual understanding, to your creativity. And, I always add the caveat that you don't have to be a fine artist to be a creative person, because literally anything that we do as human beings can be approached creatively if we choose to see it that way. But also remember to connect with others, people in your community, and to the collective, right? We have a whole planet of people and living things that are here and now, and they're surviving this world along with us. And some of those are allies, some of those are comrades. So we need to maintain and foster those connections majorly over the next few months. But I think that in terms of this full moon in Taurus, you want to make sure that you're connecting in a way that is comfortable to you. That doesn't mean that you can't step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, but things that you really are caring about, things that are meaningful to you, are going to be the things that you're going to be most effective at. Another way that we can use this energy is to make a list of resources. So we all have resources. We all have resources. Sometimes it's just our attention, but other times it is, some of us have extra money lying around. Some of us have extra time. These are all things that we can offer others. Sometimes it's emotional support. Sometimes it's being there, showing up, or having conversations with people. Those are all ways that we can provide resources to our communities and to ourselves. A Taurus likes to be comfortable. A Taurus likes to have the things that they need. And that is a very human thing, because we all have Taurus somewhere in our charts. We're all going to be impacted by this full moon, regardless of whether we have a Taurus placement in our charts. We all have some relationship to our emotional resources, to physical resources, and material resources. Those are all things that we have some level of access to. And some of us have more than others, that's okay. But I think it's a good idea to take account of what we have, what we can channel into action, what we can move forward with, and just know, these are the things that I've got relatively in the bag right now. This is what I have to offer myself and my community and the collective. Be very practical about it. What do you have? What do you have to offer others? And also make an account of what you need. Because remember, when we do mutual aid, it's not all about us giving what we have, right? That's charity. Mutual aid is mutual. It's mutual. Sometimes we are the ones in need, and it's important to remember that. It's not charity. It's not somebody with a lot of resources, bending down and helping these poor people. And that's a very different thing than mutual aid. And a lot of charities will try to say that they're doing mutual aid, and it's not. Mutual aid has a radical orientation, period. But I think this is a good full moon to take stock of all of the things that we have. Even for those of us who are like, I don't have much. It doesn't matter. The list doesn't have to be long. And again, I want us to also remember we need to take account of the things that we don't have that we need, because those are things that we might seek out to be the recipients of mutual aid. It's a mutual thing. And I think it's really important. I want to hammer that home, because as we head into Pluto and Aquarius, it's not about me. It's about we. it's about us. There is no savior coming for us. It's going to be collective that is going to be the successful path through Pluto in Aquarius. Another thing I want to encourage as we kind of work with our needs for this full moon is let's sit back and assess and let things unfold and take it all in before we make an announcement or take a direction. This is an inspirational full moon. We might find ourselves having certain revelations and realizations that lead us to a path that maybe we didn't think we would be on. So let yourself be inspired, but be deliberate and focus on getting yourself on as solid of ground as possible. Really tune out the noise and focus on what's actually valuable to you and to your communities. Because full moons are moments where things are illuminated. So that can be epiphanies, that can be realizations, that could be new information dropping into our lap. It can be all of those at once. But if we do our homework, if we get very clear about our wants and needs, and also what we have to offer, once those revelations hit, it's going to help you take practical action and kind of just know where you stand and take action from solid ground. Because we are heading into a time period in Pluto and Aquarius where there's going to be a lot of things that are unexpected. There's going to be a lot of revelations and progress and surprises. So we want to get as solid as we can with this full moon so that we can kind of hit the ground running when Pluto moves into Aquarius. Tune out the noise and focus on what is tangible, valuable, and clear to you. There's going to continue to be historic events over this next week, and I don't think that the weight a lot of us are feeling in the energy is going to dissipate too much until Pluto moves into Aquarius on November 19th. So this is another week where I'm going to need us all to hang in there, all right? And it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy ourselves and move through the big emotions that we're feeling and that are going to continue coming up. And actually, this week, this grand finale of Pluto in Capricorn gets us ready to move into Pluto in Aquarius. So just know that even the emotions, the challenges of this week, they're all indicating stuff that we need to know, we need to prepare for, that we need to take account of. And finding joy in challenging moments is a really important skill that all of us need for the future that we're stepping into, because we will have more challenging moments. We will have moments of uncertainty and where fear is being stirred up in the collective. So it's a really important skill to practice, to be able to find joy in these moments, to find the silver linings, to find the hope. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot more than I think that we give credit for. So redirecting our attention as much as possible to those things when we're getting, Debbie Downer with ourselves is going to be important. And also with people in our lives, because I know there's a lot of tough conversations happening right now. And it's not about bypassing the reality of what's happening, but it's about remembering that there will be joy, there will be hope, and there will be beautiful things that come out of these challenges. Humanity is unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depending on your perspective, we're a species that learns from fucking things up, from our backs against a wall. And so there's a lot that can come from that. And I'm not saying that I'm celebrating the fact that this is the way that we're going about it, but it is what we're facing. It is the reality. And joy is sustainable. Joy is fuel. through these tough moments. And if there is no joy to be found, then what's the point of fighting back, right? We need to know what we're fighting for. We need to practice what we're fighting for. We need to bring the future that we want to see into the present moment as much as possible. This week we're leading up to the full moon. People are going to be especially sensitive and reactive with this energy. It's not energy to push boundaries with yourself or others. And, I would just give people some space, give yourself some space. Take it easy without taking yourself out of the game. It's easy to want to hide away and tune everything out. And definitely take care of yourself. Don't force things if you don't have to. But I think it's a good time, like I said about the full moon, to be very practical and take care of the things that you care about that just need to get done. Focus on addressing those practical things as much as possible. We are going to have things coming up that are ready to be released with this full moon. And that often gets stirred up in the lead up to a full moon. So again, when those big emotions are hitting, when you're up against a wall, when you're feeling kind of cornered, it may be that that moment is showing you a need that you didn't realize you had. Or that there is stuff that doesn't need to come with us for this next chapter of Pluto and Aquarius. And that could be habits. That could be the ways that we approach things. That could be things in our life that are not adding to it. Maybe we are unsatisfied in our job. Maybe we are unsatisfied with some of the personal relationships we have. And maybe some of those things we need an exit plan for. That might be something that comes up with this full moon. But just pay attention to what it is that's coming up and what it's telling you. Because these emotional moments, these moments where we're feeling all kind of stirred and shaken up inside, there's always something to learn from that. Our bodies are really good at communicating to us what we need, but we're not always very good at listening. So this is a good week to really listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to your feelings. And, we can really get caught up in emotions. Got a lot of water in my chart. I know a thing or two about a feeling, okay? Our emotions are not always reflective of the reality that we're in. Sometimes I get all stressed out about something, and then when I finally do the thing, I'm like, why was I so stressed out about this? Why did I make it such a big, anxious ordeal in my head, right? So emotions aren't always accurate of like what we're going to be actually experiencing, right? We need to understand that. So it's about feeling the feelings, but also understanding that sometimes our feelings are not indicators of the future. And sometimes they're not even really great indicators of what the situation that we're currently in is. Sometimes we feel bad about shit that's actually pretty good for us, So there's that, something to think about with this. Be attentive. Remember that, maintaining our sense of comfort also means we care for ourselves on an emotional level. So showing up for ourselves emotionally and physically in the lead up to this full moon is going to be important. And if you are a part of communities that you feel comfortable or able to do those things for in this moment, I think that's a really great thing too. One of the reasons that the full moon this week is going to be so impactful is that earlier in that day, at 6:20 a.m. Pacific time, we have Saturn stationing direct in Pisces. And Saturn is retrograde for a significant portion of the year. So it may not be that you wake up at that moment and you're like, oh my God, Saturn is direct now. It's not always like that with those further out planets. But Saturn going direct right before this last full moon in Capricorn is very interesting because Saturn is structure, discipline, order. It's also authority. So it will be interesting to see how that plays into the mix. And, hopefully this brings some reins on what we're seeing politically here in the US, but we'll see. And then, of course, later that day, we've got the full moon. It's big energy. give yourself some room, and maybe don't be overly scheduled that day if you don't have to be. The good news is that the weekend looks more lively. Later on the 15th, we have the moon moving into Gemini. That's Pacific time, so it'll be early in the morning on the east coast of the United States. But I think there's going to be a lot to talk about with this full moon energy. And remember, a full moon isn't just one day. Moon phases last about 3 days. So it's going to be ringing out that energy over the course of the weekend. And so as different news comes out, as revelations are happening, I think that people are going to have a lot to talk about. So again, I want to caution people running away with stories and getting excited. You know, if you have some juicy thing that you want to talk about that maybe you don't have any evidence of, maybe have those conversations with people you know rather than strangers on the internet. Because I think that there will continue to be people running away with the plot, and I don't think that it's going to be helpful. And as a matter of fact, I think that we could even see misinformation or misreporting or misrelaying of information. It could be exaggerated information. So I just want people to take a pause before they run off with things, especially in this energy, because it does have a collective impact. I know that a lot of people in comment sections spreading conspiracy theories don't think that it's a big deal. I've actually seen people say, like, let me have my fun, let me have my delusion. This is actually how things like QAnon start. And I'm not being dramatic. If you look at the development of how that evolved, it's a dangerous thing to be en masse contributing to things that we don't have evidence for. So just exercise a lot of caution about how you take in information over this weekend. And in general, honestly, I think that's a good idea as we go forward. I have some thoughts about that regarding Pluto and Aquarius, which I will get to on the podcast. But really take it easy, double check your information, that kind of thing. This is also a good weekend to connect with people if you're feeling up to it. I'm sure mutual aid projects will be popping off again this weekend, which I love. I'm glad that people seem motivated by the election because that is really what we need. And I said in my newsletter this week, community is our greatest asset going into Pluto in Aquarius. So the more that we can integrate ourselves and build trust in these communities, the better off we're going to be over the next couple of decades. And there is an urgency with it. This is a timely matter. And I know a lot of people are busy, a lot of people are struggling. But even just giving a little bit of time to community is better than giving no time to community. It really will pay dividends as we go forward, I promise. And one of the things that has made me so hopeful this week is seeing people joining mutual aid organizations or showing up for their community members in higher numbers. So we need more of that. We really need a cultural shift. Organized communities and mutual aid should be the norm. I hope that in the future somebody finds this podcast and are like, why did they need to be told to organize communities so much? Because that's just how things are. That's the future we need to be building in not only the United States, but the world. And a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about with regards to fascism, it's not just an American thing. I know a lot of people following the election were talking about leaving the country. And look, I understand that impulse, but we need to remember that fascism, in the way that we're seeing it, is rising around the globe. And it's not evolving the same way everywhere because we've got all sorts of different cultures and governments and all sorts of stuff going on that it isn't exactly the same. But we are seeing a very consistent global rise of fascism that I think will be a major feature of Pluto and Aquarius. And that is going to mean that we're going to need to be really connected to each other. We're going to be needing to show up for each other in ways that we may not have had to before. But it's a global thing. So if you are somebody that is looking to move out of the country, you might want to keep that in mind, that it's not just the United States. It isn't just us. Another thing that I want to flag for listeners, it's not happening this week, but Mercury is going to station retrograde on November 25th. Retrogrades get a bad rap from pop astrology and people that just don't know that much about astrology, which nothing wrong with that, but retrogrades are not bad. They're not like cursed. It's not like bad things only happen when something is retrograde. That's not the case. But Mercury retrograde, if you're trying to file any paperwork or you're starting a new project, or you might do something that's particularly techie or start something that you hadn't started before, that's not the best time to do it during Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde is very helpful for catching up on things, revising things, and, getting things done that maybe you just didn't have time to finish beforehand. But not a great time to start new things. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is I know that with the revelation of a Trump presidency, a lot of people in marginalized communities especially are looking at, the legal documents, paperwork, passports, things like that. And if that's you, I want to point it out because I would like you to start it before the 25th. Use the time between now and then to just get things started. All right? Doesn't mean that you have to get everything done, but get it started now. And again, Mercury retrograde is a time where you can resolve things, catch up on things, not a good time to start stuff. So start that stuff if you need to take care of any of that now so that things go more smoothly for you. The other major thing that is happening this coming week is Pluto moving into Aquarius on November 19th. And it's going to be there until 2048. So it moves into Aquarius at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. And we've done this before. Remember that. We've had Pluto in Aquarius 2 times before. So you've already felt this transition. And we've already felt how difficult 29 degrees of Pluto in Capricorn is. That's why things feel so heavy right now. But even with the challenges that we will be facing in Pluto and Aquarius, I want us to remember that energy, generally speaking, it does feel a lot lighter on a physical level. So I am really looking forward to Pluto getting the hell out of Capricorn for good. I have had about enough. I know a lot of you have as well. So there's very good news. It's less than a week away. We can do it. Things will continue to be interesting until then, and after Pluto moves into Aquarius as well. So, there's more to come, but I just want to remind everybody that, again, I've talked a lot about Pluto and Aquarius on Petty Astrology. So the links to a couple of past episodes in the show to help you get ready for Pluto and Aquarius will be in the show notes. And the podcast next week will have even more of my thoughts on Pluto and Aquarius. Don't you worry. People have had this idea of Pluto and Aquarius as the age of Aquarius, like that damn song. And first of all, this is not the age of Aquarius. It has nothing to do with ages. Astrologer pet peeve. But second of all, that song is not an indicator of how it's going to be. We are obviously facing a lot of issues in this period, but there is a lot of potential as well. So I am so optimistic about what we're moving into. But I understand that there's work ahead, and I hope that you do too. And there's a lot of hope to be found. And the beautiful thing is that we get to be a part of that hope. We get to show it through our actions, how we show up for ourselves and others, how we work together, how we follow our inspiration. But again, start thinking about things in terms of we instead of me. There's beauty in being part of a movement instead of looking for a savior or trying to be one. We are our own salvation. So keep making those connections. Did you know that if you support this podcast for just $5 a month, you get access to the AstroDen Discord community, more astrology content, and the library of bonus episodes, including the Sitting in the Power meditation I put out last week, and a fresh episode of Deep Petty, where Kendall Ford and I gave our thoughts on processing the election and what we should do next. You can also join Patreon for free and get access to my newsletter. I just put a new edition out on Sunday, and it's full of information and resources to help us get ready for Pluto to move into Aquarius. So make sure that if you're not already a part of the Patreon community, whether it's a paid supporter or as a free member, you get in there. And free members also have access to our current events chat, and we also have another chat where you can just say hey to people, or you can share resources, you can ask questions. One of the reasons that I started a Patreon was because I wanted it to be a place where we could grow community. And that is one of the beautiful things about the internet, is that I can connect with people all the way across the world and vice versa. And I think we can learn a lot from each other, and especially people that live entirely different lives from us. And we can share resources with them, and we can do a lot of strategizing in the times ahead. So if you're looking for a place to build some community around astrology and spirituality, or just being a person that gives a shit about the state of the world, you are invited. So make sure you check out those resource links in the show notes. There's a lot there, and there's a lot more coming, y'all. I want to thank my Patreon sponsors for making this show possible, for supporting the work that I do, and for allowing me to grow it. Thank you for being here. And thank you to all my listeners for being here, for supporting the work that I do, and for caring about what I have to say, because I appreciate it so much, and it's really, truly an honor to be of service. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in next week for even more petty astrology.